So I'm getting pretty close to getting the e-bike complete. I got the street tires mounted, the shock mounted, control box, battery, motor. So all I have to do now is do the hydraulic disc brake and do the wiring. So anyway, I picked up this MB200 Hurricane dual piston hydraulic brake. I think this will be a pretty good brake for this bike. And then I'll do the wiring. Then we'll take this thing out for a 0 to 30 and top speed, and we'll see how it compares to a gas powered bike. So on this caliper, looks like it'll fit on there nice, but I'm gonna have to make up a bracket to go along with this mount and onto the swing arm. So I figured I'd use a stock mount. It'll bolt to the caliper, no problem. Looks like I'm just gonna have to shorten it because of the disc is a little bit smaller than the MB200. So I'm gonna go ahead and shorten this mount and then get the caliper setting on there right. And then I'll go ahead and put a slide right here, or weld up a slide to go along with the adjustment on the swing arm for the chain. So pull this wheel off of here so I can put the brake on to figure out the length of that bracket. All right. Anyway, so the bracket has to mount to the axle here, but still keep the caliper on the disc. So definitely gonna have to be a lot shorter. So I'm gonna have to drill out the holes in this mount. They're just a little bit too small to bolt to that caliper. So, go ahead and cut this bracket in half. So get this caliper on this disc, got my piece here on the axle, and then take my other piece. So just take and mark this, and then just go ahead and weld these two pieces together, flat, and I think that'll work. So put these bolts down in this thing, just to make sure I get this thing straight. Okay, so I went ahead and clamped it right there, so that'll work. Looks like I just gotta weld that up. So I'll pop this off and cut this mount, weld it up, flush with each other, and we should be good. Okay, so cut my mount there and there. Okay, so fit these two pieces together right here, weld this up, nice and flat, and that should work. So we got that welded on there. So let me see how it works on here. So that looks like it'll work. So now what I have to do is take and cut this spacer down because it can't be any wider than this spacer that was already on the bike. Okay, so I'll bolt this back wheel back on now so I can figure out a brace here. So I can figure out a bracket here to hold the caliper from moving forward and back. Looks like it'll bolt up. So now I gotta figure out a mount to put here to keep it from turning. And I'll probably weld in a slide mount right here. And that way it'll still have travel back and forth for the adjustment on the swing arm. So I'll weld up this slotted bracket. Yeah, so I think that'll work. Pretty good right there. Let me take this off and weld that up. Okay, so that looks like it'll do it. I'll just grab the inside of it too, just to make sure. So another thing I have to do on this bracket is weld some nuts back here so it'll have threads, so when you bolt the caliper on, it'll have something to grab. So we got that on there. Looks like it'll work out. So now I'll bolt this caliper on here and we'll see if everything works out. Alright. So it looks like it'll work. Sweet. So now I have this brake line up here. This is a really long line, so I might have a little bit too much. Actually, we'll see. Alright, so the line's so long on this one, 72 inches. So I ran it down through the other side. But anyway, so the brake turned out good. Got the slider bracket on there for the adjustment, so I can move it back and forth for the chain. So I have this battery capacity gauge and the ignition switch. So I'm going to build a panel out of this plastic, cut out a panel right here, and then mount the gauge down in here. Cut that out. Okay, got my little bracket welded on there. So now this should just bolt to that. So now I can put my volt gauge in here in the ignition. Mark this and cut this out. Cut that out. Gauge down in here. Hopefully, we'll see if it'll fit. Nice. All right, there we go. Got a voltmeter now. So you drill a hole about right here for this switch. So I cut some plastic. I'll probably make some plastic covers or fairings to go over all this electronic stuff. Take this aluminum and I'm gonna line it, the back of it, to sturdy it up and then to give it a mounting point. So, just take this and drill it out, put the bolts in it, like I did on this one. Put a button bolt in here. So there we go. So put a couple more here, measure it out. It'll end up like this one. Pretty easy to make the cuts for the other one, for this one, since I already made this side. Just copy it. Cut that one right there. Pretty much a mirror image of the other one. All right, so there we go. The side fairings, they're just mirror images of each other. And they got a little bit of a bend in them, so they'll clear the battery. So they'll fit up in here. So now all I gotta do is weld up some brackets for these bolts here to bolt to. And then you got the bend that clear the battery. So I hooked up the entire system on the ground one last time before I put it on the bike, just to make sure everything works. So make sure these speeds work. So it looks like everything works. I'll go ahead and mount it on the bike. So I got the motor back on there. I also had to change out the shock because the spring rate on the KTM 65 shock just wasn't enough with all the battery and motor and stuff on there. So I got one with a heavier spring rate. So that one seems to work good. So anyway, I'll wire this thing up, install this battery. So I'm also going to use a different control box than I did in that first video. I'm going to go ahead and put this Mosfet controller on there. It's a little bit smaller. I think it'll work a little bit better for the smaller mini bike frame. So I got the battery mounted and the control box, and I made up a new mount, an aluminum mount that bolts down here to hold the control box, and it bolts back here to the motor mount. So now I'll run the wiring. I think I'm gonna run this block inside this area here, so it'll be hidden by all the plastic or the fairings. I'll zip tie all these phase wires from the motor along the frame here. So I got the phase wires hooked up to the controller and then back over to the motor. So now I'm going to hook up this Anderson plug to the block. Got the Anderson plug hooked up, and I can hook this to the battery. I'm going to put some wire loom over this stuff, keep everything neat. Cover up this block and then tuck it up under here. So connect to the throttle or twist grip. This thing's gonna have about 5,000 zip ties. All right, got the throttle cable all zip tied on there. Okay, so I got the phase wires hooked up to the block and into the controller. So now let's plug in the hall wires. So go ahead and mount my battery capacity volt gauge on the panel that I made. Install the ignition switch. Plug in the ignition switch. So hook up the throttle and the 3-speed switch. So I pretty much got everything tucked up in this space here, and these are the wires here. I left these down. There's a zip tie up here, the ones that I don't need right now. Okay, so I pretty much got all the wires tucked. I think I'm gonna try to mount this charging port like up here somewhere on this panel, on one of my panels. Like maybe right here, cut a hole here. Pop a ribbon about right there, and that should do it, maybe. Okay. All right, so that ought to work. There's our charging port. Nice put a little cover on that. So I pretty much got it. Now I just have to bolt this panel on here. So let me pop this stock panel on here. All right. All right, it's pretty much finished up. I think just gotta throw that panel on there. Hopefully it goes on as easy as the other side. Alrighty, to try to keep super clean lines, I was going to run this brake cable and this kill switch underneath the panels. They go on the outside. Alright. So it keeps the lines all clean. No brake cables or nothing. Then you just come out right in the front. I think we pretty much got her complete for now anyway. Still have to work out the bugs. Who knows what'll happen or how it'll run. Let's get the battery gauge, battery voltage with battery capacity. So I'm gonna get a baseline on the e-bike, 0 to 30 in top speed. It has a 4.81 ratio, 11 on the motor and a 53 on the rear sprocket.
So it has 3 settings, 50% voltage, 75, and then 100. So I'll see what it'll do on the lowest setting real quick. First, from 0 to 30. Man, where's the engine noise? It only does 25 on the first setting. So we couldn't even get a 0 to 30. All right, let me do the second setting. Now we're at 75% voltage for the second attempt, 0 to 30. Okay, so that was a lot better. 75% voltage, 0 to 30, did it in 5.99. That's pretty good for a 53 on the back. All right, let me do the 100% voltage test. All right, let me go test out 0 to 30, 100%. So we have to beat 5.99. I can hear the chain skipping a little bit. I'm gonna have to work on that. Okay, 0 to 30, 100% voltage. They see how many volts we got on the battery. Showing 82.7, so we're good. All right, let me make sure the drag is set up good. All right, 0 to 30, 100% voltage. All right, 0 to 30, 5.73 for a baseline. Let me go do top speed. So after all that riding, it's showing 73% battery and 77.9 volts. So it went down by 5 volts and used about 25% battery, 27% battery.
So the e-bike did 50.77 through the neighborhood, top speed, and then 5.73, 0 to 30. So it feels real similar to like the Duramax 208 on the Bonanza bike. as far as speed goes, except a lot smoother and quieter. And the Mega Moto frame definitely runs really smooth with the front suspension and the rear swing arm. So that was definitely a good upgrade. The brake feels really good. So definitely have to swap out that chain. From 0 to 30, the chain was slipping a little bit on the gear, even though it's tensioned. So I'm gonna throw some RLV gold on gold chain on there. So I guess we'll see where we go from here as far as trying to make it quicker and faster.